Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's expert webinar titled Going Beyond ML Exploring Computer Vision and NLP Using Deep Learning. I am Satyakshi from String People. We are India's largest enterprise training provider. I will be your moderator for today's session. In today's webinar, with a decade of rich experience across the analytics technology stack, we have our expert Sayan, who has a unique blend of extensive production experience on cutting-edge AI, ML, and data science technologies. Actively involved in tech events, seminars, he has been a passionate evangelist of analytics and BI technologies such as Power BI, Spotfire, Python, Alteryx, etc. He is IBM certified data scientist, TIPCO certified Spotfire author, Microsoft certified professional, SQL Server 2008, BI developer, and maintenance certified, to name a few. In today's session, Sayan will start with the basics of machine learning and explain the industry use cases of deep learning. He will also explain case studies of computer vision, real-time face detection using YOLO, exploring the world of deep fakes using GAN, an example of NLP module, and demos of state-of-the-art language models. Some housekeeping rules quickly we should have. If you have any questions during the session, please type it in the chat box and they will be addressed by Sayan after the presentation is over. We will be having a dedicated question and answer round once the presentation is over. So without further ado, let's start today's session. Over to you, Sayan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Satyakshi. So first of all, it's wonderful to talk to you, and thank you so much for sparing your time for attending today's session. So again, wonderful to hear from everybody, and wonderful to have all of you in this audience. So I'll get right to the meat of the session. We can be starting off with Satyakshi did brief us on the broad agenda, but I'll talk about specifically some of the tech stuff that we'll talk about as part of this session. So we'll start off with some of the fundamentals of what is machine learning, and we will talk about a little bit about what is ML versus what is DL, and the focus of today's session will be mostly on the deep learning part, right? Most of us in this audience, we've been hearing about machine learning for quite some time, and what we are trying to do in today's session is to go beyond the basics. There are a lot of people talking about ML, and ML has been there for a long time, so has deep learning, but we'll try to get a lot into the specific use cases of how deep learning is used and all that. So we'll start with an introductory note. We'll talk about some use cases, we'll talk about some case studies, and from there we'll get into real code demonstrations on how deep learning is practically done. Specifically, we'll talk about aspects related to computer vision. So we'll talk about computer vision, and we look at problems like detection, localization, segmentation, and we look at some very interesting case studies like face recognition, object detection, and all that kind of stuff. So that's how we're gonna pace it out. I also have a few very interesting demonstrations lined up for you on a very advanced technology stack, which is referred to as generative adversarial networks. GANs are, the absolute cutting edge of, right at the absolute cutting edge of deep learning. Some of you might have heard this name, generative adversarial networks. Now, these are not part of your usual trainings that somebody will teach you about, but I try to bring up some case studies on how we can, maybe some of the ways we are using GANs, and maybe a small demonstration towards the end on how we can artificially generate pictures, artificially generate text, and so on and so forth. Right, so that's how we're going to pace it out in the session. So first of all, we talk about machine learning. AI as a term was coined in 1950s. 1950s was an amazing year when human beings were fascinated by the living world around us, and we wanted to do something. We wanted to basically figure out that, hey, how do we make machines? How do we make human beings, do things that machines can do? How do we go back and have human beings, do things that machines can do. And that's what led to a huge amount of interest in the domain of artificial intelligence. Okay. Now, when we talk about AI, one thing that I want to clarify for the audience, when we talk about artificial intelligence, remember AI and ML are not one and the same thing. When we talk about AI, I think there's a lot of general misconception about the term. We talk about AI and ML pretty much in the same breath. So when we talk about AI, we pretty much look at AI and ML in the same breath. But AI and ML, they are not the same thing. There's a very subtle difference between what artificial intelligence is and what machine learning is. And we'll take a minute here to talk about some of the differences between what is AI and what is ML, right? So once again, just going to quickly share this with all of you. So all of you, imagine imagine a scenario when let's say you have an AC on, all of you are in your homes or your offices right now, and you're attending this class, right? Imagine that you have an automatic air conditioner. Think of a very plain vanilla, very naive example, right? I'm trying to dissect these two terms. Like, again, as I said, like when we talk about AI, we almost refer to machine learning on the same breath, but that is all not the case. Like we have situations where we have technologies which are AI, but it need not necessarily be machine learning. That's what I'm talking about here, right? So let's say you have an automatic air conditioner which is running on auto mode, and let's say for example I have set the room temperature in my AC to, let's say, around 23 degrees Celsius. As an example, I've set the room temperature to 23 degrees Celsius. Now, what happens? Now the system will automatically look at what is my current temperature, and on the basis of that, on the basis of my current temperature, the system will automatically adjust. So it's quite incredible. When my room temperature goes below 23 degrees Celsius, the AC will stop cooling. And when my room temperature goes above 23 degrees Celsius, the AC will automatically kick off. When you set the fan speed to auto, that is how automatic ACs work. Now, if you think for a second, if you basically think from the perspective of a small kid, imagine there's a small kid that you have, and if you think from the perspective of a small kid, it is intelligence, right? You're talking about a very naive form of intelligence where we are saying, hey, I think the AC understands when the room is getting heated and when the room is not getting heated. And it has some very naive form of intelligence through which it's able to control the amount of cooling. And that is what we refer to as rule-based AI. It is AI. Make no mistake. It seems like a very simplistic system. It seems like a very simplistic conditional programming logic that we have put. It's almost like an if-else statement. You can think of all the programmers in the audience. We can imagine this as a simple if-else statement that we have put. And that's what it is, in fact. However, we are talking about rule-based AI. So rule-based AI is that form of AI where the rules are provided, where the rules are hard-coded. Okay, the rules are hard-coded, and you tell the machine what to do and how you need to do it. Okay, so rule-based AI is that form of AI where you tell the machine what to do and how to do it. You specify the logic, the domain logic is hard-coded in the system, and you tell the machine explicitly what to do and how to do it, and the machine does it for you. So the people who designed this air conditioner, they would have hard-coded the specific logic on what to do and how to do it, and the machine is basically working on that behalf, on that basis. And that's the way, that's the idea behind what rule-based AI is, right? So there's a lot of rich domain expertise that you also require. Again, a good example of this could be, let's imagine that you're using these washing machines, automatic washing machines in your homes. You set the washing machine to auto mode or monsoon mode or dry mode, and the entire programming is already done. A simple example I'm giving you, the entire programming is already done, where somebody has hard-coded the specific logic in which the machine is supposed to function. So for example, you just press a button and everything is set, everything is preset. So there's certain rules or there's certain domain expertise that is hard-coded in your washing machine in automatic mode. And it's almost like an AI agent. If imagine there's a small kid that is operating the washing machine, and the kid will say, "Hey, you know what? This is the AI. I didn't tell it anything. I just pushed a button and it knows what to do and how to do it." But is it machine learning? No, it's not. It's not machine learning. It's a very simple rule-based form of AI, which we can also traditionally refer to it as expert systems. And it purely operates based on static hard-coded rules that people like you and I, we are hard coding. All the programmers in this audience right now, anytime that you have developed an application, you have created a website, you're basically writing code, you're writing rules. So when you open up facebook.com and you see that, the background page and the colors and the fonts and the specific text and the content on the web page, what kind of AI is that? Go to the registration form of Facebook. Let's say you're trying to sign up to Facebook. You want to register in the Facebook portal. So they'll ask you for a few details. You give your name, you give your email ID and all that. And they also ask you for your date of birth. And let's say you enter something, and the model can, and that particular website can give an error back to you. It can return an error to you saying that, hey, you know what? This is what it is. And we are expecting a number, but you have not entered a number. So it's almost like the agent that is programmed or hard-coded in the website is intelligent enough to understand that you have not entered a number. That is rule-based coding. So most software that we write, technically, if you have ever written software in your life using whatever language, doesn't matter. It could be Python, Java, C++, C#, whatever language you write, whatever software you write, when you're coding anything, that's a classic example of what I would call as rule-based AI. So technically, we are also designing AI systems. Although we are not doing machine learning, but anybody who has written code in their life, you have all done AI. Another simple example could be autopilots. Imagine autopilots of aeroplanes. Okay, most people think that it's machine learning. It's like rocket science or something. No, it's not. Pilots train for hours, hundreds and tens of thousands of hours. They will practice in a simulator. Now, what is a simulator? Before they take the actual flight, they will practice for a long time in a flight simulator. And if you think of a flight simulator is not machine learning. Flight simulator is pure rule-based AI, where you're hard coding the specific logic and the instructions of how the plane will fly is all hard coded. If the parameters are this, okay, the heading should be this, the speed should be this. It's almost like cruise control. That's what you do. Which is why when pilots are using autopilot in mid-flight, it's only during the stable phases of the flight that they will use autopilot. Only when you're in cruising altitude, 30,000 feet above sea level, that is the only period when you can actually use autopilot. Some of the riskiest phases of the flight, that is takeoff and landing, when you look at those phases of the flight during takeoff and landing, typically pilots will not use autopilot. Bad weather conditions, we have all seen in movies, right? You don't need to be in a cockpit to understand that, obviously. We have seen in movies, no? Bad weather conditions, turning off autopilot. You would have, Captain Sully, that movie was there, very interesting movie. We've all seen in movies, right? And this is a very important assumption that we make in rule-based AI systems, that it is subject to lots of assumptions. We make a lot of assumptions about our, about our model. Okay, without those assumptions, this will not hold. Okay, hope all of you get a sense of it, what rule-based AI actually is. And typically, the rule-based AI process, which is the traditional way how we design software, right? It goes through flawless checks, right? This is how you write software. It goes through flawless checks, right? You design the code, you develop the code, you test the code, you rigorously test it across all your test cases, and only then that code goes to production. Okay, imagine a rocket launch system, a very traditional rocket launch system. It's completely automated. But can we say it is machine learning? Can we say the machine is predicting what will happen the next step? No, it is not. Traditional rocket launch, when you look at it, all the sequences are automated. Again, these are classic examples of rule-based AI coding. Now the question is, then where is the relevance of machine learning? And we'll come to deep learning. Then where is deep learning coming in the picture, right? And I see this very confusing generally for people who are starting out, and even for people who are pretty mature in their current roles. I somehow see this gap of understanding still very relevant, very prevalent. In fact, you know everything about modeling, you know everything about supervised learning, unsupervised learning, all the basic algorithms people have studied. A lot of resources nowadays. Won't be surprised if you have people in the audience who already know a lot of ML. But somehow this difference, I still see people be confused about. That hey, Sayan, is AI ML the same thing? They're not. Now we understand what. So then what is machine learning? Then why do we need machine learning? If I can write rules, if I can hard code rules for all use cases, then why do we need machine learning? Why do we technically need machine learning then? Because I can write rules for every use case, right? So why do we need ML? Well, the primary use case of machine learning is when the rules are very difficult to figure out. Okay, so you can see that I just put a small note here. When the rules are hard or unknown, I don't even know what the rules are supposed to be. That's when we go for machine learning. I think a classic case of machine learning could be, if I just have to give an example to all of you of how what I mean by a hard rule. So what do I mean when I say that the rules can be hard? What do I mean by that? A great use case of that could be, let's say we are trying to do elephant detection. I'll give a very simple example to all of you. Okay, let's say we are trying to build a model which will look at the picture of an elephant and it will try to detect whether it's an elephant or not. It's an image classification system we are trying to build. Now think about it. Can we design this system using static hard-coded rules? Like, can we design the system using static hard-coded rules? Yes, we can. We can potentially look at all the attributes of the elephant, and we can say, hey, you know what? The object that we are seeing on our screen is an elephant. So the object that we are seeing on our screen is an elephant if it has, let's say, 4 legs, 1 trunk, 2 tusks, 2 eyes, 2 ears, the body size, the body color. You can hard code all these features. We can technically do it. We can technically hard code all these features. And if all these features are prevalent, then it's an elephant, else it is not an elephant. So we can look at those kind of factors, right? But imagine the complexity. Will all elephants look the same? So will all elephants look the same? No, it will not. All elephants will not look the same, right? Especially if you look at elephants in a herd. Think about it. Think about elephants in a herd. Okay, when we talk about a herd of elephants, look at how complex the elephant detection problem becomes now. Okay, see, traditional software is easy. I would say you have the requirements given to you. The customer will, you guys will do a lot of brainstorming that, hey, you know what, we want our application to do exactly this. So your requirements are absolutely, it's absolutely flawless. There's no ambiguity there. But you imagine the logic that you're writing to detect elephants. There's a lot of ambiguity there. Now we are talking about elephants here. I don't even see a tusk. The tusk, that is the white teeth that comes out. That the tusk is such a defining attribute of an elephant. If you're designing a rule-based AI system, you will invariably have a code that will say, hey, you know what? If I see a tusk, it's an elephant. But none of the elephants in the picture right now have a tusk. So you can imagine your AI system has already failed. So these are classic cases where you cannot write rules. The rules are hard, the rules are difficult. And further, there are use cases when the rules are even impossible. Like, I mean, you don't even know what the rules are. For example, let's say you want to detect snow or you want to detect a geyser. So imagine that you want to write code using which you want to detect a natural geyser. So how do you write code to detect a natural geyser? The code will look the geysers are this, right? So tell me, how do you write a code to detect geysers? So geysers, how do you write code? How do you detect the attributes of a geyser? Impossible. You can't do that. You can't write. You can't write any logic. You can't write specific features. So these are cases where it's not possible to do it. So especially when we talk about hard problems, when the rules are difficult, the rules are ever changing, the rules are not static, they're dynamic. We use machine learning. And then how does the process of machine learning happen? The process of machine learning happens not through rules that I'm hard coding. I'm not hard coding the rules anymore, but I'm giving the machine lots and lots of input output combinations. The machine is figuring out the rules. That's what machine learning technically is. Okay, in the words of Arthur Samuel, who beautifully described machine learning, all of you can see in the slide. On the left hand side, there goes classical programming, what we've been talking about all this while. This is how programming has happened historically all this while. This is classical programming we are looking at. So this is classical programming that we are looking at, where you provide the data, you provide the rules, you hard code the rules, and on the basis of that, you build a model. This is how classical programming, the approach of classical programming historically has been, right? Now, if you look at machine learning, What is machine learning? Machine learning is where you don't hard code the rules. The rules are not hard coded. The rules are learned by the machine in a way. And as Arthur Samuel rightly puts it, machine learning is the field of study that gives computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. Okay, so this is what machine learning actually is. So here, what you're doing, you are giving the machine lots and lots of input-output combinations, and the machine is learning the rules. So here the rules were kind of hard-coded. You can see here the rules were kind of hard-coded, whereas here the rules were actually learned by the machine, because you don't know the rules. I myself don't know what those if-else conditions technically were. So I'm just giving the machine lots and lots of picture, label, picture, label, picture, label combinations, and I'm letting the machine figure out that, hey, machine, you tell me what the rules are. Like in the case of the elephant example, what I will technically do is I'll give the machine lots and lots of examples of, hey, you know what? That's your picture, and that's an elephant. That's your picture, that's an elephant. That's a picture, that's an elephant. That's a picture, not an elephant. That's a picture, not an elephant. So you're showing the machine lots and lots of input-output combinations, and the machine is able to figure out the rules in the process. Okay, it's almost like how you teach a small kid. Okay, the process of teaching a small kid is, I think that's probably one of the best analogies of machine learning I can give you. How does a kid learn? A kid does not learn through rule-based instruction, does it? Imagine how funny it would be if you're teaching your kid, hey kid, you know what? If if the thing contains a task or this elephant, else not elephant. It doesn't work that way. Like kids also learn through examples. Okay, picture the the scenario of a very small kid going to kindergarten for the first time or play school for the very first time, and the teacher will start talking about apples, oranges, fruits, right? Apples, bananas, and all that. How does a kid learn that? You think a teacher is teaching a kid that, hey, on size and shape and color and all that? No, it's not. You're showing the kid lots and lots of examples that, hey kid, fruits like this are apples. Fruits like this are bananas. Fruits like this are so and so forth. This is how you're teaching the kid in the process. Fruits like this are this. Fruits like this are this, and so and so forth. That's how the kid is learning in the process. Okay, so that's the idea behind what we are trying to do in machine learning. Okay, now let's move on and let's try to shift our focus a little bit into what we are trying to do in the world of deep learning. Well, that's a very good question by Senthil. Although the questions will take up towards the end, but I do want to honor that question, sir, from you. Very good question. It does not. Interesting thing is it does not. And I think a classic example of machine learning will be Google Photos. And since you asked that question, and since I've been demonstrating about elephants, I do want to take a minute and show you that precise thing that you asked me. I'll go to my Google Photos and show you. Very interesting. It does not. So let me just show you that. You can see I've searched for elephants on Google. This is my Google Photos account, right? And very interesting, you can see, first of all, this is not rule-based AI. It is not that there's some hard-coded logic that Google Photos is using which it is detecting that, hey, is it an elephant or is it not an elephant? It's not doing that, honestly. It is not some hard-coded logic it is using. But you can see what, so it doesn't differentiate between, pictures of elephants and other things. Okay, so it doesn't differentiate really. So that is not there. It doesn't really differentiate between a real elephant and a picture of an elephant. So you can see, for example, this is an elephant picture, but the model still thought that it's an actual elephant. So just the attributes and the features are basically what matters. Okay, yeah. So very interesting. And I think since I was talking about other examples, you see how difficult it is actually. Snow, for example. You can't write code to detect snow, guys. Impossible. You can't. So if I just go and search for snow, now you tell me how you can write code to detect snow. You can't. You just can't write code to detect snow. You can't do that. But if I just go back and kind of search for snow, very interesting. The model is seeing snow, and this is so incredible. Yeah, we know there is snow there. I think this is one of my friends actually went to this hill station, and we know this is corresponding to snow. But you tell me what rules or what logic will you write to detect snow? You can't. It's impossible. So these are cases where you have to use machine learning, right? Another very interesting thing I want to talk about, that machine learning is prone to errors. Machine learning is prone to errors or mistakes. Okay, that's one other thing I wanted to highlight. Okay, so this is a picture I took from a flight I took recently. Beautiful. I think the whole thing was looking very nice, and but see how we managed to fool machine learning. These are all classic use cases where we are trying to demonstrate that even Google is making a mistake. This is my Google Photos account, by the way, and Google thinks that there is snow right now. I don't think there's any snow here. This is just a picture I've taken mid-flight, and we are looking at clouds in the sky. But the attributes of clouds seem to be very similar to attributes of snow, and Google thinks, hey, you know what, I'm looking at snow right now. This is one more very important aspect I wanted to highlight, that machine learning is prone to errors. Unlike a traditional rule-based system, which is pretty flawless, you write the logic, you hard code the logic, and everything just works on the basis of that. Yes, still go back and debate and discuss that, yes, there are errors that can come, but I think those errors are contained. Okay, the machine will still work on the basis of the bounds that you have defined. But the moment you come to machine learning is fundamentally prone to errors. That's again one other aspect I wanted to talk about. It's fundamentally prone to errors. Okay, and which is what we are able to see right now, because it is like saying, if you ask a kid, if you basically show the kid a small a picture of a fruit, the kid can make a mistake. Absolutely, it can. And if you think about it, that sign, why is the kid making mistake? Imagine it's your kid, or it's your cousin, or it's your small brother. They can make mistakes, right? You show them some fruit, and they say, you know what, this fruit is actually this or that, and they made a mistake. They say it's a green apple, but it's something else. It's a pear. Why are they making a mistake? Because you have not trained them properly. Okay, so machine learning is also prone to mistakes. And two key aspects of machine learning, based on what we have talked about, two key aspects: data, algorithm, model. I think this is one of the simplest, maybe simplest possible examples of machine learning I'm trying to give you. All of you look at the screen, everybody. So let's say we have got this XY. Very simple example of machine learning we are looking at. We have got, this is the X and this is the Y. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 question mark. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9 question mark. and we are basically trying to predict what is the output value corresponding to 9. So that's what we are trying to predict. So what we do is we look at the first 4 rows of data, whatever historical data has been provided to you. Okay, you try to understand the patterns there. Whatever historical data has been given to you, you please try to understand the patterns there. So we are not hard coded any logic here, but we look at the available data. We use some algorithm. There's some logic or some algorithm that we use to figure out, hey, you know what is the function, or what is the mathematical model, or what is the mathematical equation that we have devised out of it. So use some algorithm and we build a model. This is the y equal to x plus 1 that we have learned in the process. Remember, we have not hard coded this. We have not hard coded any rules in the process. I've not mentioned that, hey, you know what, if x is this, y should be this. Else if x is this, y should be this. Else if x is this, y should be this. I've not hard coded any of that stuff. I've simply used some algorithm, and there are a variety of algorithms that we can use. In the world of traditional machine learning, you have your supervised learning algorithms, and in deep learning we have neural networks. All those are technical topics again, but we can use a variety of algorithms, and we can end up building this mathematical equation, that y equal to x plus 1, that you have managed to learn in the process. So we are using some algorithm, we are building a model, and this model is basically the rules of the function, as we call it. Okay, so this is the rules of the function. These are traditional jargons that we are using in the world of machine learning. And then using those models or function, we can go back and predict that, hey, next time when the input is 9, what is the corresponding value of y? So this is you substitute 9 here and you get 10. This is the crux of what we are trying to do. The only difference is when you talk about image data and textual data, other complex forms of unstructured data, the only difference will be the number of features will be much higher, right? So here we are looking at only one input, that is 1x. When you talk about computer vision data, images, pixels, the number of dimensions can be in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands in NLP. Okay. Otherwise, the crux of machine learning and the crux of deep learning, all that you're trying to do is you are trying to find out some relationship, some mathematical relationship between the input x and the output y. All you're trying to do. You're trying to find out some mathematical relationship between the input x and the output y. Okay, you're trying to learn that relationship. that's what you're trying to do in machine learning based AI. So just to summarize the conversation that we started from the very beginning, machine learning is a means of implementing AI, right? So there are lot of other ways you can do AI in an organization. Using rule-based techniques, you can do AI. You can build an AI system using rules, traditional hard-coded rules. You can do it, right? Many modern gadgets that we see nowadays, they say AI enabled this, AI enabled that. I think now we should be smarter. We should be smarter. There's no, yeah, we get it, it's AI, but you know what? There are a lot of other AIs that we see around us. No big deal. It's not. Tell me if it's really intelligent, right? Again, just on a lighter note, maybe a question, on a lighter note. If you look at it, this is ICICI Bank, and they have actually got this, this particular virtual assistant, and this is probably a craze nowadays. Many organizations are looking at, building virtual assistants nowadays. So this is the bank that I'm actually opened up for you right now. Let's see. It's going to open up in a minute. And they have this thing called Ask iPal. Okay, this is the virtual assistant that you basically get. And if you think about it, what are we trying to do there? In fact, what are you basically trying to do there? So you're entering a query, and on the basis of that, the bank is basically giving you some predefined responses, right? If you think about it, this is Ask iPal. It took a minute to come. I guess this is the virtual assistant, as we call it. A lot of websites have it. It's pretty much all around us today, right? But if you think about it, is it really machine learning, guys? Is it really machine learning? Can we really say that this is machine learning? We cannot. It's not machine learning. It's simple, traditional, rule-based AI, as we will call it, right? Very simple, very basic, very naive rule-based intelligence, right? If you ask it some questions, like for example, if I ask it, simple question, I'll ask it, what is the best credit card? If I ask a general question that, hey, what is the best credit card we have? What is the best credit card we have? Look at this. It didn't even understand my question. So this is the classic example where the system is based on rules. So some predefined questions would have been defined. Some predefined questions, Q&A would have been saved in the database, and it is simply giving me answers on the basis of that. That's what we are looking at right now. Okay, and then I can go back and say this whatever credit card and all that. You can already see. Maybe if I just ask one more question, hey, what is the weather? Just for fun. If you ask it a different kind of question, maybe the virtual assistant will say, I don't understand your question. Now you tell me if Google will ever do this. Google will never do this. Google will have an answer to every question that you have. It will point you to links, and it will point you to Google itself, right? But I think this is a great difference where they are both AI systems, right? This is also AI. Google Assistant is also AI. But what is the core difference between these two systems? This is rule-based intelligence, a very static rule-based intelligence, where they have accumulated lots of these Q&As that customers typically tend to ask. And Google Assistant, on the contrary, is machine learning based AI intelligence, where Google is constantly learning based on how you question, how people are searching. Your voice, in fact, also matters, but none of these things happen here. Okay, so some classic examples we are seeing right now. All right, wonderful. I hope everybody in this audience is comfortable right now with the broad definition of what is AI and what is ML. And I'm going to take a step forward into the next piece. Beyond machine learning, what is deep learning? This is the other big thing that we are talking about nowadays, right? So the thing is, deep learning is nothing different. The concept of deep learning is very similar to machine learning. And what started happening is, machine learning is very popular. Even today, I think machine learning is quite popular. If you're looking at embarking on any project, or if you're looking to do something, chances are very high that you will be, using some kind of machine learning stuff and all that. But then one of the things about working with real data, one of the things about working with complex data is that oftentimes, your traditional machine learning algorithms may not be enough to help you. Okay, your traditional ML algorithms may not be enough to help you, build the best model, right? So your traditional ML models may not help you. For simple problems like this, absolutely okay. In fact, some of you might know there's a linear regression that we have done. You don't need a neural network for this. But for more complex problems, if you look at it, a simple ML algorithm may not suffice. And that's exactly where we require deep learning. So if you just try to look at this, look at the screen here, a very simple way to associate ML and DL would be, there's data. What is data? Data is the input-output combination. Data is the input-output combination that we have. And we can use some algorithm. It could be a machine learning algorithm, or it could be a deep learning algorithm. And in the process, we end up building a model, which could be a machine learning model or a deep learning model. That's what we are trying to do broadly. So we have data, we use some algorithm, and in the process, we build a model. Now, the algorithm that we are using, it could be an ML algorithm, where you have things like your decision trees, naive Bayes, logic regression, linear regression. It depends on the kind of algorithms, and some other technical aspects are there, right? You can use on boosting. All those are traditional machine learning algorithms that we have. But if you're dealing with data that is more complex, especially when data that verges on computer vision, images or text or unstructured data, audio, video, right? These kind of data, if you're dealing with, then machine learning algorithms may not be, suitable to extract all the patterns. In this case, we use deep learning to extract those patterns. We use deep learning to find out those input-output combinations. Okay, so that's where, and deep learning algorithms, they border on neural networks. So they border on neural networks behind the scenes. Okay, that's what we are trying to do. Okay, otherwise the ideas are very, very similar between what ML is and what DL is. People who are aware of some of these terms, we have training data, testing. These concepts don't change even when we go to deep learning. Deep learning is not something out of the world. In fact, your machine learning remains the base, but all that we are learning in deep learning are a set of new algorithms which are bordering on neural nets. Okay. In fact, the traditional equation of deep learning, maybe if I will not get too technical here, but just maybe one pointer I wanted to give you. The traditional equation of deep learning remains as y equal to wx plus b. This is what all you're trying to do in deep learning. Okay, starting from the simplest artificial neuron, which is called a perceptron, to the most complex neural network spanning thousands of hidden layers. Ultimately, you're trying to find out this y equal to wx plus b, where w is the weight and b is the bias. And if you look at it, at its core, it's a linear model. So it's a very, very interesting idea. So deep learning, a lot of what we do in deep learning, the concept, emerges from the foundational concept of linear regression. So you're stacking many traditional linear models, one on top of each other, link it with an activation, and you build a neural network out of it. And then there are varieties of neural networks and all that we have here. Okay. Now what we'll do in the next phase of our session is get into some core use cases where neural networks are actually used to solve problems. I won't get into things where we are using, but we'll look at some use cases where we are actually using neural networks for solving some practical problems. And very interesting, we look at cases with respect to what we refer to as computer vision, right? So what is computer vision? We look at. So just to summarize once again, we have AI. AI is the big picture that we are looking at here. Machine learning is a way to implement AI, right? There are other ways to implement AI also. And deep learning is a specialized case of machine learning, right? So deep learning and ML, I would say they're part of the same bucket. Okay. In fact, when you talk to many researchers in the field, they don't even use the term deep learning. In fact, Andrew Ng has a very famous course in Coursera today, which is called machine learning. Most of you would have heard of it, I'm very sure. He doesn't even call it deep learning. He calls it machine learning. Many practitioners in the industry, they refer to machine learning itself. We don't even talk about deep learning. So deep learning is a more advanced way of doing ML. That's one way to look at it. Okay. All right. It's most about the jargons and all that we are talking about here, right? Okay. Now moving on, I'm going to introduce one more very interesting jargon right now to all of you, which is called computer vision, right? And we look at some very interesting questions with respect to computer vision. Just give me 1 second, guys. And maybe just to summarize, because we talked about a few of these ideas. And again, this is one area where I feel, we generally tend to struggle quite a bit, especially in the problem identification stage, which is actually very important. And as I talk to a lot of organizations in this domain, I think one very key pain point is how do you look at a business problem and how do you figure out whether you need to do machine learning or not. That's a very important thing, something I personally feel. So should you use machine learning or should you not use machine learning? How do you take a call? Because now it is more like, let's say if you're doing some POC, your boss might say, hey, you know what, build an ML project for me. Do whatever it takes to do machine learning. It could come out like that. But then you have to question, you have to stay there, you have to question, hey, what is the business requirement? What are we trying to achieve? And do we even need machine learning? In other words, when should I use machine learning, right? So in a way, I just try to categorize this into 4 broad steps. So we should use machine learning when our problem typically handles very complex logic. We are trying to handle very complex logic. Remember, the rules are hard. I told you the rules are very difficult. You can't hard code those rules. That's when we should use machine learning. When the system has to scale up very fast, the scalability is there. If it's a one-time solution, we will not use machine learning. I'll give a very simple example to you. Let's say you want a company to detect CEO. Okay, let's say like the organization is trying to search for its next CEO, Chief Executive Officer. Will you use machine learning for that? Almost laughable, right? Obviously, it's a very complex logic. Like what? So based on the different features of your applicant, you are trying to predict, hey, is this person likely to be a CEO or not? So it's a very complex logic, no doubt. But the amount of label data is very limited because the organization has only had 5 CEOs in the past. So we don't have very many examples to really teach the machine, hey, you know what? This CEO was good or this CEO was not good. And the second issue is that the scalability aspect is not there. So it is not worth doing machine learning. This is a very important problem, especially for people in the management level. I think the cost aspect is also very important. Is it worth investing time on an ML project? If we can get it done using a rule-based system, using static logic, good enough. We are saving cost. But is it worth investing all the time to set up a tech team and do something where there is no scale? So these are again questions that need to be answered, right? Requires personalized attention. This is again a classic use case of machine learning. All your recommendation engines that you see around you, the Netflixes and the Practo, which is linking doctors to customers. You can think of your Spotify, Amazon Music. Again, these are excellent use cases of machine learning. We have all heard of these examples. I don't want to repeat it again. And adapts in real time. Very important. Real time, the system should adapt. Okay. In other words, the rules are dynamic. In the world of machine learning, the rules are dynamic. Dynamically, the rules will basically change. So these are some cases where you will generally want to do machine learning. So when not to do ML, this is also, I think, very important to understand when not to do ML. So when should you not do ML? So we should not do ML when your problem can be solved using simple rules. Very important. If you think that you have a business case and your management is saying, okay, use machine learning, well, you can justify, you know what, we don't have to incur the high cost. Data scientists are very expensive. Why hire them? We can get it done using a simple rule-based solution. We have developers in our team. We can build a solution for you, right? You don't need machine learning for that. And these are again things that you should keep in mind, that not everything requires machine learning, right? Very important, when your problem does not adapt to new data. So when new data comes, does your model change? Does your logic change? If that is not happening, it is not an ML problem. It will remain fixed all through. A simple example could be, imagine that you have a requirement that every midnight, a particular task will run. Every midnight, a particular task will run. 12 o'clock at midnight, the data load process will run. And that's a fixed process that will happen. The trigger will happen at 12 o'clock midnight, the ETL job will run. Now, do you need a machine learning algorithm to predict that, hey, you know what, it's 12 o'clock and we should run? You don't need that. It is not a prediction problem. It does not adapt to new data. It doesn't matter what happened yesterday. Today, the process still has to run. So that it does not require any ML, right? Or you imagine about an alarm clock, a simple alarm clock where you set an alarm at 8 o'clock every day, the alarm will definitely ring. That is not an ML problem. It's a simple rule-based static problem, right? However, can you design a solution, an example of an alarm clock that uses machine learning? Well, technically you can. That is also quite an interesting proposition. Well, we can look at something, let's say like that Nescafe, that e-coffee maker that you get, no? Something like that. They can, so we can have a situation where, let's say the model is learning over time. Hey, you know what? Every Monday, Sayan typically gets up very early. So we should prepare the coffee at 7 o'clock in the morning. But typically Tuesdays, Wednesdays, although he sets alarm at 7 o'clock, he puts a snooze and he eventually gets up at 9. So I will brew the fresh coffee only at 9. And you can see, very interesting, the machine is adapting to new data. Maybe after COVID, my patterns have changed. The machine will adapt to that. These are again classic cases where you can tailor make a ML product. It could be very interesting. We can have an ML based, a machine learning based coffee maker, right? So this could be some interesting ideas you can explore down the line. Another very important thing I would like to highlight: machine learning cannot be done if your problem requires 100% accuracy, right? If you're looking to build a system which is 100% foolproof, you cannot get into machine learning. Absolutely not, right? Absolutely not. So machine learning cannot be used in that domain because machine learning is fundamentally prone to errors. If you look at all the controversy that we are having around self-driving cars and all that, Tesla Vision, a lot of controversies come up. They are all ML-based systems today. They're all using machine learning, but then they are not 100% accurate. There might be instances where there's something that comes up, but the model understands it as something else. And one of the other things is that it's very easy to fool machine learning. Okay, we are looking at a lot of things right now, but since I talked about self-driving cars, very interesting. These are some pain points that you will typically see in the world of machine learning, right? So just going to quickly show you how you can fool machine learning systems, just like I showed you in my Google Photos, right? We looked at clouds in the sky, but the model thought that it was actually snow. So yeah, so very interesting. This is actually a case study where they found that if you have a stop sign, right? So how is the self-driving car supposed to work when it sees a stop sign? It's supposed to stop, right? But we have managed to figure out that it's very easy to hack the self-driving car. You can hack the self-driving car, and although we are seeing a stop sign on the screen right now, just by putting some stickers on the stop sign, you can make the car think that, hey, you know what, it's left, right, and all that. So very interesting. This is the classic case where they talk about it. So this is the stop sign. So the model will look, the camera of the car will look at that stop sign and say there's a 99% probability that it's a stop sign. But look at the right hand side case. There is only 80% probability it's a sports ball. Very interesting. And all that I've done, I put stickers on the stop sign and I've made the model believe it's something else. And these are absolutely very important things to keep in mind, because these raise larger questions, which relate to society, ethics, and all that stuff, right? Because I can literally hack the stop sign and I can make the car do anything. So very interesting, actually. And these are again, they border on the ethical aspects of machine learning, which is again a very different topic. But we are seeing a lot of work happening in that field. How can you fool machine learning systems? How can you fool computer vision systems, right? So these are again things that are happening a lot as we see. And finally, we should not do machine learning if your system requires full interpretability, right? If you want the net models to be fully interpretable, we typically should not do machine learning, because one of the things about machine learning that most of you would have heard this term called black box. So machine learning models are black box models. You cannot entirely explain what is going on within them, especially neural networks. And as we get into lots of hidden layers, you can't exactly explain what those hidden layers are. So next time when you look at the picture, and next time the model says, hey, no, but I'm looking at a car, a snow, a cloud, and so on and so forth, like the model cannot precisely explain why it is looking at that. Although we have made tremendous progress in the area of explainable AI, that's yet another interesting topic. XAI is what we call it. We have ways around that. We have things like Shapley values and all that can be used for that. But yes, if you want a system, especially in very sensitive domains like finance, healthcare, where stakeholders are very specific as to why a particular decision has been taken. They're very specific as to why a particular decision has been taken. We are very, I would say, we are very resistant to using deep learning and all that right there. And this is more so because people who are working in finance, you would probably know that there are regulations like GDPR that we have, right? We have got regulations like GDPR that we have in the in the world of finance, and and once again, regulations like GDPR make it mandatory for an AI system to explain why a particular decision was taken. So which is why the explainability aspect is actually very important. If I have to be very specific with all of you, what article number it is and all that, you can read about it. This is Article 22 of GDPR. You can read about it. This is GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, that binds companies to, it's a legal requirement that organizations have to ensure that you explain the results of your AI system to the customers. I'll give a simple example to you. Let's say in India, you want a credit limit increase on your credit card. Okay? So you call up the customer care and you say, I want a credit limit increase. The customer care person will say, you know what? This some backend system is there, and we cannot increase your credit limit, or we cannot approve your credit card, right? But on account of GDPR, the banks who are bound by GDPR, you can look it up. They are bound to explain. They're bound to specifically give you reason codes. We call them reason codes, and they're bound to specifically give you what is the reason, what is the precise reason why they have denied the loan, why they have not given the credit card, why they have cancelled the credit card, and why they could not increase your credit limit. Because these are all done using machine learning today. And again, there are legal regulations around this today as we speak, which is why, again, the explainability and the interpretability aspect is very important, as people who are working in these domains might know. Okay, so that's again some interesting aspects to look at. Yeah. All right. So now, moving on. Let's come back. And what I want to do now is take a step back into the computer vision piece and look at some very exciting examples which I want to talk about, specifically with respect to computer vision. And that's the piece that we're going to be coming into right now. So first of all, what do we mean by computer vision? I'm very sure people in the audience, you've all heard of computer vision, right? All of you know what is computer vision. You've at least heard of the term computer vision, right? But what is computer vision? Computer vision is basically the ability for a computer to see and perceive things around them. Okay, when humans are able to see and perceive things, we call it vision. When computers are able to see and perceive things around them, we call it computer vision. Right, so that's what computer vision is. It entails a broad array of different things which we can be looking at right now. And specifically, I will start my conversation with something called image classification. Then we'll get into some detection models and all that stuff, right? So let me just quickly share this with all of you. Right, so this is basically what your normal what your normal computer vision entails. All of you can see this. All of you can see my screen, right? So this is what a normal computer vision entails, right? So where we have lots of different pictures, and all that we are trying to do is we are trying to look at the picture, and we are trying to classify, hey, what is the object in the picture? What is that picture corresponding to? Is it a cat? Is it a dog? Is it a cow? Is it an elephant? Is it a bird? That's what we call classification. So the entire field of computer vision can be split into multiple subtasks. So computer vision is a very broad role in a way. It's a very broad role, and the entire field of computer vision can be split into multiple broad subtasks. And the simplest of it all is what we refer to as image classification. It is what we refer to as image classification, where we look at the picture and we try to predict the object in the picture. Okay, we look at the picture and we try to estimate what is the object in the picture. Now, the other thing about computer vision could be detection. This is the more interesting aspect, right? This is the more interesting aspect where we look at detection, where we are trying to question not only what is the object in the picture, but hey, where is the object in the picture? So very interesting. We're looking at detection right now, where we are trying to question that, hey, not only where is the object in the, what is the object in the picture, but also where is the object in the picture. And if you look at it, very interesting. We have all seen this technology for a long time. I think everybody's been on Facebook. 2009-10 is when I opened my account, and it's been a long time. I don't use Facebook a lot, but I'm sure everybody has seen that photo tagging system where you hover over a person and Facebook automatically tags you. Not only that, it also puts a bounding box around your face. So there are two specific problems that Facebook is solving. A, it is looking at the picture and it is trying to find out, hey, where is the object in the picture? It is trying to do that. And B, it is trying to tell you, hey, what is that person? Classification. So there are two types of things that are involved. So face detection is basically where it is trying to detect where is the object, where is the face in the picture, and two, what is the person in the picture? Who does the person correspond to? That's what we are trying to do in this particular thing. All of you can see that right now. Again, very interesting. This is face detection. Vehicle detection is also another classic use case of detection technology, where there are multiple cars on the road that you can see, and we can use surveillance cameras, which are used in Indian roads today as we speak, right? Number plate detection, again, excellent use case where there are two specific problems you're solving. A, you are trying to find out where is the number plate, and B, you're trying to find out, hey, what are the digits in the number plate. Both the problems you're basically trying to solve. Okay, again, this is OCR and number plate recognition that we are trying to do. Okay. So these are some aspects. So again, you can look at it. This is basically what object detection is all about. Okay, so one is classification and two is detection. We're looking at a detection technology right now where you try to identify, hey, what are the objects in the picture? What are the different objects in the picture? And where are the objects in the picture? So we are seeing an object here, an object here, object here, object here. And now what are the objects? That's what detection is all about, right? If I had to quickly summarize this for you, I'll show you an interesting example also in a minute. If I have to quickly summarize it for you, the broad landscape of all the things that we are trying to do in computer vision, this will be a very interesting summary of the same. All of you can look at it. This will be a very interesting summary of the same. Here it goes, guys. Look at this, all of you. What you're trying to do on the yeah, so classification is what you're again trying to do on the left hand side. That's what classification is all about, right? So everybody can see this, right? That's classification. And oh, I'm sorry, I think it was that screen of main moderator. Yes. Okay, yeah, great. So this is classification. And this is localization. Classification is where you're looking at a picture and you're trying to classify, hey, what is the object in the picture, right? You're looking at a picture and you're trying to effectively predict, hey, what is the object in the picture? That's what classification is. Then we are basically looking at localization. So what are we doing in localization? You're looking at the picture. You're looking at the picture and you're trying to two problems in localization. One is what is the object in the picture. So we are solving two problems in localization. One is we are trying to find out, hey, what is the object in the picture and where is the object in the picture. So there are two problems we are trying to solve. You can see that we are putting a bounding box around the cat. So we have managed to put a bounding box around the cat that, hey, I think this is where the object is. Okay, so just going to put some light here, I think. So we put a bounding box around the cat. So this is where the object is, and this is what the object is. This is the technical term that you will hear a lot in the world of computer vision. So we're talking about types of computer vision problems. The third one is what we call detection. Now, localization and detection are very similar. Conceptually, they're very similar, but I think it's more of a technical nuance that we are talking about. Detection is when we typically are dealing with multiple objects, right? So when we talk about detection, we are typically dealing with multiple objects. That's what detection is all about, where you're trying to identify, hey, where are the objects in the picture and what are the objects in the picture? I see a cat here, I see a dog here, I see a duck here. So localization is for single object, whereas detection is basically for multiple objects. Detection is the more real world thing that you will see a lot more. Localization is more of a technical term, it's more of a conceptual thing. But what the implementation that you will see a lot more in practice will be detection. Detection is what you will see a lot more in practice, right? And finally, we have something called segmentation. You can see the picture very beautifully, show you what segmentation is. And I think one of the things that you can understand is detection. Detection is great, but the problem with detection is that it's not 100% accurate. Detection is great, but it's not 100% accurate. And because of that reason, the boundaries around the object may not be perfect, right? Not 100% accurate, because of which The boundaries may not come perfectly. And I think a classic example of that could be the self-driving car problem. You can see the dog right now. The model says, hey, you know what? This is where the dog is. But there is a lot of overlap, right? The bounding box of the dog and the bounding box of the cat seems to have a lot of overlap between them. Is great, works for most simple cases, but I think practically speaking, detection will be inaccurate. Accuracy per se detection will actually suffer. That's one thing to be aware of. Uh, so, and as I said, a classic use case could be if you try to relate this to self-driving cars. Let me just quickly show you a simple example of how self-driving cars use segmentation. Self-driving cars will always all be based on segmentation technology. Otherwise, detection is very common. Like if you look at detection is quite common in use cases pertaining to even for cameras nowadays. Many modern mobile phone cameras, if you turn on the camera application, so many modern day cameras will basically use detection. So detection is a very common thing that is used in many modern day cameras and stuff today. Where if you point the camera at an object, the camera will automatically kind of put bounding boxes around the respective faces of the object. So detection is something that fundamentally happens today. But yes, if you look at use cases like this, the self-driving car one that I showed you, look at this, very interesting. For example, this one. Look at this one, very interesting. Look at this one. This is what the car is actually seeing, right? You can't put a bounding box around the people, because the moment you try to put a bounding rectangular box around the people, the borders will actually overlap. These are again key challenges that you will actually face. The borders will basically overlap. Okay, so we want to be very accurate. We don't want to hit the person, right? So we cannot do detection in these cases. And very interesting, like guys, if I ask you, please put a bounding box around the footpath. You can all see the footpath, right? Now, can you put a bounding box around the footpath? You cannot. There are certain cases where you cannot even solve the problem with detection. Because if you are to put a bounding box around footpath, the rectangular box will go like this throughout. So you can imagine this is not even practically feasible. If I ask you, please put a bounding box around the trees, how will you put a bounding box around the trees? Please tell me. Okay, you will put some box here, some box here, some box here. Not possible. So this is where we look at segmentation. Segmentation is basically about drawing precise boundaries. Segmentation has tremendous use cases in the world of healthcare. I think anybody working in healthcare, anybody from GE who are joining in, you have some of the best devices, and they're doing a lot of work in healthcare, especially from in the segmentation field, right? Where we can look at chest X-rays and we are trying to find out, hey, you know what? Um, More of assistive technologies. We are not saying doctors can be replaced, but we are saying that, hey, next time I can look at that. Uh, you know, uh, the image of your X-ray, okay? I can look at the image of your X-ray and I can try to predict that, hey, you know what? This is the object. These are the contours of the object that I can see. A foreign object. Let's say there's some bullet that went in, or this is some nail that went in. Okay, something like that. Some foreign objects that are in your body. The models can automatically tell you the exact contours of what the object looks like. And there are assistive technologies which can guide the doctors in the surgery or the operation. Okay, so interesting things we are looking at here. Okay, I wanted to show you a classic use case. We've been discussing a lot of theory for some time, but no fun. I think let's look at a very interesting use case where we're actually using uh, a couple of these things here. So I wanted to turn on my webcam and show you some Python code where we're actually able to see some interesting stuff in the class. Okay, and the next 20-25 minutes I'm going to be pacing primarily on demonstrations, lots of practicals, lots of use cases I'll show you on pure code. Okay, that's what we'll see here. Okay, and then we look at some Q&A. Okay, let me quickly turn out this curtain. I think because I think my normal webcam will not be taken here. Just give me 1 minute, okay, guys? I'll just quickly close this curtain. I think it's too much of light coming. So, all right. I guess this is better. Yeah. Okay. All right, wonderful. I think so. One of the things I'll try to do now, I'll quickly go back and show you a couple of interesting demonstrations on this, as I said. So first things first, let me show you a very simple demonstration on how detection actually happens. And I've written some Python code, and specifically here I have used a library called OpenCV. OpenCV is one of the most popular Python libraries using which we can do detection. Now, OpenCV has been around for a long time. Just to clarify, people who are already a little technical and who have been in this field for some time. So I would say, so you'll probably have heard of this term already. And OpenCV stands for Open Computer Vision. It's an open source library. It's been there for a long time. And lot of computer vision work can be done in OpenCV. Now, having said that, OpenCV today does have support for deep learning. Historically, a lot of computer vision was done using rule-based AI techniques. And this is again something I want to clarify. I think we should be in a good position to understand this now, because I think we have talked a lot about it already. But I think historically, a lot of computer vision was actually done using rule-based techniques. Sorry. But today, OpenCV does have support for a lot of deep learning as well. I wanted to quickly run some code for you, and just wanted to show you how, how we are able to look at this. Let's see. I think my webcam will open up right now. All of you can see this is my webcam. This is the other webcam, by the way. All of you can just maybe, this is the other webcam which I'm streaming on GoToWebinar, and this is the other webcam which you can see on my screen. This is more important, I think, because this is where I'm going to show you the demos. This is my laptop webcam, which may not be that good. Okay, this is like a simple one. All right, wonderful. So I'll try to quickly, kind of close this. Okay. Okay, done. And just wanted to show you a simple example of how we can go back and do a few things. These are some simple ones. I wanted to show you something really cool. And technically, if any of you have heard these terms, we use something called a Haar cascade classifier. We call it a Haar cascade classifier. And again, there's some complex terms that we are looking at. Specifically, we call it a Viola-Jones algorithm, Haar cascade. So this is what we are actually using here. And we can do this to effectively identify some of the facial features. So let's see that, how it's actually working. Okay, all of you can see. So very interesting. So we have got a model that is working live, real time. So it is looking at the pictures of my face. It's not perfect. You can see there's some small rectangles that keep appearing, right? So this is again a classic use case where we are saying, okay, machine learning is prone to errors. But yes, I think it does a pretty decent job. You can see. So it's able to do face tracking. As I move this side is able to put a. This is a classic case of object detection. What we are looking at right now. Okay. Again, these are done using very simple techniques. Very simple techniques we are using right now to do this. We can also build a Haar cascade classifier to detect eyes. This is eye tracking we are doing. Very interesting. Eye tracking, not perfect, but you can see very interesting. I just wanted to clarify one thing, guys. I'm on a very powerful camera that I'm streaming on GoToWebinar, but unfortunately my laptop camera is not great. So, which is why you can see that this one, I think the resolution is not that great here, which is why it's struggling probably. So the hardware is equally important. So because machines are only taking the picture as input. If the resolution of my input picture itself is bad, then the models will also be bad. So okay, that's just one thing I wanted to call it out. And let's quickly see an example where we are doing the face tracking and the eye tracking together. Okay, which will make me look like a ghost probably. And this is how it looks like. You can see the face is also coming, and this is also coming. Simple predefined algorithms we are actually using for these purposes. In case you're wondering for potential applications of this, there are a lot of it. I can probably see some of these things being used nowadays for invigilations, people writing exams, right? A lot of these techniques can be used where we try to monitor that, hey, or maybe interviews also. Like you're asked a question and beside you've got one more laptop and you're like, okay, question is asked, let me search the answer, let me, like people are also very smart, no? Like you are here and your friend is sitting there, interviewer asks the question and your friend, you have got Google Assistant also today, no? I'm giving you solutions to problems probably, but question is asked, speech to text, it will convert it to the thing, it will go to Google and the model will give the answer to you and you see the answer. But we can potentially use these kind of eye tracking technologies to track, hey, you know what, did the person momentarily look that side? Did the person momentarily look this side? So those kind of things could be done, which a human being can be missed. A human being can potentially miss. So these are again some very interesting applications we can look at. Behavioral aspects could be understood a lot better using these things. Okay. Uh, I wanted to show you another very popular object detection model called YOLO. YOLO is one of the most powerful object detection models out there. Some of you in this audience who are already working on computer vision, you might have already heard of YOLO. We've got something called YOLO. We've got something called SSD, single shot detectors. You only look once. YOLO stands for you only look once. Technicalities, I'll not get into this session. It's a very short session, obviously, because we've got a lot of folks who are first timers as well. But I think the demo is really exciting. I wanted to show you the demo at least. So all of you take a look at it. Really exciting demo. These are some some classes, some functions which I've defined, and I wanted to quickly go back and run YOLO on again the live webcam feed. Detecting on video, no, I will not do that. I will quickly detect on my frame, and you can see very interesting. Again, the thing will come up. It takes a little bit of time to open, and this will be pure play object detection we will do. YOLO is not defined. That's interesting. Just 1 second, guys. I thought I defined it already. Okay, just 1 second. Oh, sorry, I forgot to run this code. Sorry. Yeah, I have to instantiate YOLO. This is the pre-trained model. There are ways you can design your own architectures in CNN. That's again a very technical topic, convolutional neural networks. YOLO is based on CNNs, obviously. But yeah, YOLO, we are using a pre-trained model. And there are a lot of these open source pre-trained models that are available where somebody has already done some work, they've already trained the architecture, and we're simply using them. We are users of this model, basically. That's what we are looking at here. So let me quickly go and run this for you. And this is actually bringing deep learning to the masses. I think as the saying goes, democratizing AI. We are seeing a lot of that today. You don't need to necessarily know everything to understand the big picture views, right? If you just have to understand, hey, what is it? I think you can just look at the demo and understand. Yeah, technically it's a different thing. See what we are seeing? Person, sign is a person, 100% probability. Bounding boxes come, detection we are doing. So where is the object? What is the object? Okay, I can see a lot of other objects in my room right now. You can see there's a small lamp. Is it detecting? There's a chair there. See, the model is saying there's a chair there. Okay, I think this one has not come. Table nahi aa raha hai. It's not able to detect that. But I think the chair is coming very nicely. Again, I'm telling you, I'm not on a very powerful camera, but probably if I turn it around a bit and show you around the room, probably a little bit, we can see other things also. Other objects will also be there. Probably, I don't know. Not maybe it's not detecting it that well, but oh, water bottle, wonderful. You can see the water bottle in the room. Huh? Water bottle, that's also coming perfectly. 92% probability. Object detection, and will it detect multiple objects? Yes, it will. Maybe if I hold the water bottle here, it will detect two things. Dekho, bottle, 94% probability, person 100% probability. Simple pre-trained model I'm actually using. And maybe if I rotate it around the room, I can see the bed. And if I just turn it, go a little away, you can see the bed, there's a 100% probability it's a bed. Even that works perfectly. There's a 100% probability. We're looking at a bed right now. Okay. So again, the detection models are working very, very well. So pre-trained models is what we are using. Even if I hold my mobile phone here, the model will still work fine. Think of cell phone, cell phone, person, bottle. Okay. Some of the most common objects are already, pre-built for me. The simple application we are looking at of what object detection technically looks like. Okay, and there are innumerable use cases of these things, right? There are innumerable use cases, like, let me just quickly turn this off now. Oh my God, what's that? Just 1 second, guys. I'll quickly shut down the kernel. Yeah, that's me able to close it. Okay, perfect. Now, wanted to show you one more very interesting example with respect to again more like object detection. And this is the different package. So we talked about 3 packages today. We talked about OpenCV. OpenCV is one Python library we actually use today, right? We talked about YOLO. YOLO is a absolute cutting edge object detection library I showed you. Very interesting, very accurate in our predictions, right? I'm going to show you something called face recognition, which is touted as, a very, very popular face recognition package. And very interesting, I'll tell you, the really interesting aspect about this particular library is that it requires very little data to train on. Like, for example, what we'll do in the class now, just to give you a little bit of rundown. So what we'll do in the class right now, I'll take you to that folder, and I will have 6 pictures. That's it. See, one of the main things that we have heard of in machine learning is what we require lots of data. We require lots of data to train the model, right? But if you especially look at this one, in many real world scenarios, we typically do not have a lot of data. This is one of the things that one of the pain points of deep learning. Okay, but if you look at the current folder, we only have one picture of Biden, one picture of Kalam, one picture of Kamala Harris, one picture of Modi, one picture of Sion, one picture of SRK. And we will be doing machine learning on this data right now, real time. But you can see the number of examples are very less comparatively. And what if I tell you, even with this, I can build a very accurate model? Technically, we use something called Siamese networks for that, which is again a very different topic, but we call it Siamese networks. One-shot learning is what we call it. Learning in one shot, right? It's kind of like, it's like you just show one picture and you can learn on the basis of a single picture. Because otherwise, what typically happens in computer vision is you need to show the machine lots and lots of examples of pictures. But this is one-shot learning we can do. But I'm just showing this to you through a pre-trained package right now, not to design the architecture from scratch, but the pre-trained package I'm going to show you. So very interesting. I will pip install, I'll basically import face recognition. This is the package where all of it is built in. I'll quickly go back and just show this to all of you, how this is working. So all of you can see. No such file directory desktop. Okay, just give me 1 second, guys. I think okay, just give me 1 second. This could be some hidden file actually present here. Yeah, that's the reason it's actually picking it up. Yeah. Okay, there seems to be a hidden file here. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to just quickly fix that for you. Yeah, an interesting one actually. Yeah, just going to quickly fix that for you. I wanted to really show this example. It's a really cool one. Yeah. All right. Okay, wonderful. It started running now. I just made a small tweak here. The issue was that there was a particular file that was missing. Yes, yeah, there was a particular file that was missing. Don't worry about that. I think that's important. I just made a small, it's more of what you call hacking. Just did a small hack here to fix the error. Errors always keep coming, when you're trying to demo something. But I really wanted to show this. This is really cool, really exciting. I think we're almost in the nick of time. I wanted to take another 10 minutes with you. And I wanted to show you, look at this, guys. We have basically trained this model. On this data. Okay, so I've given it only one picture of cyan. I've given it one picture of SRK. I've given it one picture of MODI. So these are the different example pictures that I've shown the model. The model has learned that, and on the basis of that, it is looking at my face and it says it's cyan. How incredible that is. I showed it a different picture of cyan, and now it is seeing a different picture and it still knows it's cyan. If I open my specs also, it will still work. Is it? Oh, wonderful. It still works. Maybe if I even it still know it's me, right? And interesting thing is, even if I open up a different picture, right? For example, let's say if I open up a different picture, let's see if it is working. Let's see how well it is working actually. Okay, let's see how well it's actually working. So we can just look at some example pictures of mine. Maybe just a simple example I'll show you. This was I was in KLL some time back, and maybe I'll just open up this picture. Very interesting. See, it is still cyan. It's a different picture, right? I've trained the model on only one photo, and see, all of you are able to see the screen, right? See, it is still able to put a bounding box around the face, and it still knows it's cyan. Incredible. So this is again some classic examples of how it's actually working. And I've got a group photo. So I was doing this corporate training, some time back, and very interesting. So I think just wanted to see if this works. See if this works. I think the resolution is not that great. Oh, look at this, very interesting. I'm trying to go a little close, and I think once I do that, it's able to see cyan. See, it's also putting bounding boxes around the other people in the photo, but they are unknown. But the one that is correctly is cyan. See, even at a distance, is able to correctly see cyan, which is actually I would say is quite quite accurate. So the really exciting thing about this example is that we have made the model learn based on only a single example. I just gave a single picture of what cyan looks like, and the model has still learned on the basis of that. Now we have our Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He's got a lot of beard. But let's go back to a different picture of Modi where he was not having any beard. Like, let's see if the model is able to catch that, because that will really prove the efficacy of our computer vision model. It doesn't matter whether you grow a beard or not, but the facial features of the person remain very similar. So I'm just going to go and maybe see a different picture of Modi, maybe when he was not having this much of a beard. Okay, no beard. Let's say Modi, no beard. It's a very popular topic nowadays, right? So I'm just going to quickly Google this out and show you a different picture of Modi when he was not. So let's look at this one. Very interesting. Let's look at this one and see. The model still correctly predicts it's Modi. How incredible that is. Remember, I trained the machine only with data which is a picture of Modi where he was having a beard. So now the model says, hey, this is cyan and this is Modi, which is again so accurate. And again, it's just this is exactly how your system should be built. This is what we call generalizability in machine learning. Good fit model. What is good fit model? It's not overfit. It's not specific to a particular picture, but the model will work irrespective of what kind of picture you show it. So which is again quite interesting. I've got a few other pictures which again, I think the big picture idea is clear. and that's what I wanted to basically show you in this particular demo. Okay. All right. So let's move on. Next up, I wanted to show you another very interesting application. This is actually on semantic segmentation. I told you what is segmentation, and I wanted to give you at least a small use case of how segmentation could be used. Could be particularly useful for a lot of different pieces. And until now, what we did was we looked at lots of exciting demos on detection, where you're trying to put a bounding box and you're trying to find out where is the picture and what is the picture. Now we are trying to look at segmentation. And some use cases we looked at, some use cases we talked about, healthcare and all that. But one particular use case I wanted to show you, this is the Kaggle challenge, and very interesting. What they are trying to do is they are trying to use computer vision to detect salt deposits beneath the Earth's surface. And this is particularly important for oil and gas companies when they are trying to do oil exploration. I think knowing the salt deposits are very important. So again, one of the things that we are trying to do here, we are trying to look at, just gonna quickly show you some parts of the implementation here as well. I'll run this for you. I'm going to show you the code perspective also. Again, these are again not maybe some very exciting things you will like at this stage, but yes. What was the tool? So Jai Prashad, I'll take up the questions later, but I just glanced at your question here. But I used the face recognition package, sir. I used the face recognition package. It's a pre-built one. So we used OpenCV. Next we use YOLO object detection. Then we use face recognition package for this other example. And specifically, the technical term for that will be Siamese networks. One-shot learning, where you train the machine with only single example. That's what we looked at. And now we are looking at something called semantic segmentation. Segmentation means you want to put precise boundaries around the objects. That's what we are trying to do to solve this $100,000 Kaggle challenge. This was a competition that was conducted 3 years back. Another potential application of segmentation could be, we have a few challenges going on in Kaggle right now, where you are trying to detect ships from the satellite images, which is a very interesting prospect. You can think of this missing case of the MH370 plane, no? The plane lost in sea. So we can technically use segmentation models, which have been used already, but it's like finding a needle in a haystack. So no amount of rule-based intelligence can do it. You can't potentially send out ships and man the ocean. You can't do that. It's not possible. So how can we use computer vision to look at satellite images, and how can we use segmentation models to detect ships in sea or some kind of missing parts in sea, things like that. These could be again great use cases that we can look at. Specifically, this is the problem we are trying to solve, and what we are doing is we are using something called segmentation. Okay. Technical aspects are very different. I will not get into those things here in the class. Technically, they are very different pieces. But I wanted to quickly show you at least just a big picture idea of the implementation so that you can appreciate how some of these things are actually done in code. Okay. And I'm basically using something called Colab. In case you're wondering what is this environment called, it's a Jupyter notebook, and we're actually using something called Google Colaboratory. It's a cloud version of a Jupyter notebook that we are using. Okay, I don't have to install anything locally, but I'm just using Google Colab to for faster compute and stuff. That's what we are doing right now. So I'll quickly go and connect on and load some of this stuff here. Okay, I hope this is good. This looks okay. Just give me 1 minute. I have to set up a few things here, guys. Authenticate. All of you can see. So this is me authenticating and allowing Google Colab to talk to G Drive. I have to authenticate so that because it will read data from my G Drive, Google Drive. So I have to give a token and I have to authenticate. This is how the process looks like. And then I'll basically load this Kaggle data through an API. You can see the data for the competition can be loaded from an API. Kaggle gives an access to an API, and this is what we will be using to load our data. Okay, so I'll load this data from the API, and straightforward, I'll just go back and do this. This is the entire data set we have got. You can see Kaggle, competition, download, TGS, salt identification. So all good. We're downloading our data through an API, not a manual way, but through an API. Okay, all done, all set. And now we can go back and build our model. Now this part I will not get too much into. This is the technical aspects and how to use CNN for segmentation. But I just wanted to show you some examples of images and masks, how the pictures look like, so that you can appreciate the piece at least. Okay, all of you can at least appreciate the piece. And these are how some random images look like. All of you can see. Okay, this is the original picture. This is the seismic photo that you're seeing on the left hand side. These are the pictures that are already provided. Okay. So on the left hand side we have the seismic photos. On the right hand side we have basically got the masked photo. This is like the input output combination. The input is the original photo and the output is basically the masked photo. That means, hey, the white corresponds to salt, yes, and the black corresponds to salt, no. So that's what we are trying to do. And I think even if you look at it visually, I think it makes sense. We're able to identify this, but it will not always be the case, right? If I go to a different photo, that will not always be the case. Very hard. Like with the human eye, you can't really say what is salt and what is not salt. If I go to a different picture, randomly I'm going to a different picture. Again, very hard to discuss this with the human eye, but you can again see that the left hand side part corresponds to salt, the white part corresponds to salt, and the black part corresponds to no salt. And we've got the exact contours around it. And what am I trying to train the model? I want the model to exactly learn that pattern. So that's what we are looking at right now. So very interesting. I have trained this model. This took several hours actually. I took a long time to train this network. I won't be able to do that in this classroom setting right now. Just wanted to show you after several rounds of training, after a lot of training, after training this model for at least I think an hour it took to run this code. Okay, we were able to build this, which is again not as accurate, but I think for $100,000 competition I'll take it. Which is again not that accurate, but I think it's still pretty decent. So on the left hand side you have the seismic photo. The middle part is what is actually expected. So this part corresponds to salt. This part does not correspond to salt. And the right hand side part is the predicted part that my model predicted. So you can see the model is very close to predicting actually where the salts are coming. So we're able to see that also. So this is again a simple example of how segmentation can be practically done. It's not as accurate, but I think we need to again look at a few other tuning level things to make it work appropriately. Right? All right, wonderful. So this is something I wanted to talk about with all of you. And finally, I wanted to leave you with some closing thoughts on a very exciting topic called generative adversarial networks. Now, you can't do this in maybe half an hour or even 1 day or even 2 days, but I think such an exciting topic. And because we are talking about deep learning, I wanted to expose you to a few interesting ideas here. So we are looking at something called GANs. They're the real cutting edge of deep learning. They were proposed by a person named Ian Goodfellow in 2014. And if you ever heard of instances where we are able to create artificial photos, or we are able to generate songs, generate music, generate text, have a machine write books and all that stuff, those are classic applications of generative models, right? So all this while we've been doing this, right? If you look at it, all this while we've been doing this, that hey, try to predict the price of a house price prediction problem, regression. You're trying to predict something. Hey, what is the number? Given the digit, OCR, you're trying to detect, hey, what is the digit? Is it a 0? Is it a 1? Is it a 2? Like an MNIST you're trying to do. And what are the faces? We looked at that in the class today. You're trying to detect that. It's a prediction problem. All this while we've been trying to do prediction problems. But with generative models, all of these are discriminative models. A large part of what you do in deep learning and machine learning, they're all discriminative models where you try to predict something. But what we are looking at right now, they're generative models where you're trying to create a house, you're trying to create a digit, you're trying to create a face. So very exciting avenue. Just wanted to leave you with some closing thoughts on what GANs actually are, where you have a machine artificially generate stuff, which is very different, very unlike anything that we have seen. And if I just have to show you how the iterations actually work, just a very small demonstration maybe. If I just have to quickly show you how the iterations actually work. So I'm basically having this machine automatically generate different types of digits. Digits are from 0 to 9, 0, 1, 2, 3 up to 9. And I'm basically having this machine automatically generate digits. And if you see in the very first round of training, the machine failed drastically. There's nothing. I mean, it's almost gibberish that it draws. And over a period of time, what it does is it does slightly better, slightly better, slightly better. So the example of GAN is basically like a kid trying to draw something. Imagine there is a very small kid. Imagine there is a very small kid and the kid is trying to draw a picture of a house. What will the kid do on the very first day? The kid is a very small kid, right? You don't expect the kid to draw the house perfectly. The kid draws something. It's all gibberish. Day one, father gives feedback. No kid, not a good job. So go rework on it again. Next day, the kid comes back, does slightly better. The father gives more feedback. Next day, the kid does slightly better. The father gives more feedback and the kid draws mountains, windows, and it becomes a beautiful house in the process. This is the big picture idea of GANs, what we are looking at. Technically, there are other things like discriminators, generators, and all those things, but the big picture view of GANs is you have a kid who is trying to generate pictures of houses. There is a father who is sitting there to give feedback. Initially, the kid is drawing very, very poor quality houses. And over a period of time, it does slightly better, slightly better, slightly better, slightly better. And by the time we complete 10,000 epochs, you end up generating very, very real houses. In this case, very, very real digits, which, in fact, there's a website. I wanted to quickly share this with you on closing notes. Very interesting. There's a site called, so very interesting. There's a site called thispersondoesnotexist.com. And this is the classic case of GANs. Now, if I show you this picture, you'll probably believe that it's a real picture. But what if I tell you it's a completely fake picture, completely artificial picture? The network has generated it. So very interesting. It is inspired by a GAN. All of you can read about it. It's called a style GAN technically. There are a lot of varieties of GANs we have. And if I refresh the photo, I'll get something else. Okay. If I refresh the photo, I get something else. And very exciting because I think this is, in fact, very scary also. I mean, when you look at these pictures, they look like very realistic photos. But the machines have generated these photos. It's like a kid who was trying to draw something initially, and over many iterations, the kid actually ended up drawing something as beautiful as this. Okay, all right, wonderful. So that's about from my end. It was an introductory session. Hope all of you enjoyed my class. We will be getting to some questionnaire now, some Q&A now, and we'll also have some few other slides that we wanted to present on closing notes. And yes, so I think at this particular juncture, I will, yeah, okay, yes. So Satyakshi, you want to take it over from
Yeah,
here?
sure. Can we have the slides?
Okay,
Sam?
wonderful. So yes, sure, wonderful. Yeah, I'll just quickly present the slide for you. So we'll take up
Okay,
your
thank
Q&A,
you,
guys,
thank
in a
you.
minute from now. Yeah, all right.
Thank you for the slides, Sam.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah,
Sam, for your invaluable insights on
yeah,
technology. I'm sure it
yeah.
was certainly a beneficial session for all the participants who have joined here.
Thank
If
you.
you guys are interested in learning more about AI and ML and other technologies, do check out our batches of virtual investor-led training on our website, springpeople.com. These reality trainings are leveraged online from the comfort of your home and flexible as per your schedule and location. If you do not find any suitable batches, we would be happy to discuss and schedule private batches for you. The corresponding training website links can be found in the chat box. For more information, write to us at training@springpeople.com or call on our number displayed on the current slide. Now, we will open the forum for Sayan to answer questions that we have received during the presentation. So, Sayan, over to you.
Yeah, sure. Yes, sure. I think I have seen a few questions that have come. Some of them I think I've answered. I'm just going to quickly take up. Yes, so this is a question that I had from, so yeah, so Harish, there was a question that you had. ML is error prone, so yes, so cannot be used. So one way to look at that is very subjective, I would say. You cannot really say that we cannot use machine learning, but I would say it's more on the lines of it's kind of more on the lines of it's a call that you have to take in a way. It's a decision that you have to take on how much of ML you want to use and how much of error that you can accept to have. Because see, at the end of the day, we are seeing a lot of use of machine learning in the world of healthcare. Now it's debatable that and you know what, we are looking for perfect solutions in healthcare. But at the end of the day, uh, doctors also make mistakes. Human beings also make errors. And I think that's the fundamental assumption that we are basically trying to make here. Okay, that's the fundamental assumption that we are trying to make here. So doctors also make mistakes, and in a way, humans also make errors. You can look at it that way, right? All right. So it's more of a trade-off, I would say. It's more of a trade-off, I would say. Yes. So I would say, Chaitanya, you had a question, a very, very good question you had actually. Can machine learning be used to detect faults in huge computing processing machines? I would say there's a lot of machine learning that organizations like AWS are already using. And specifically, the term that we use there is called, specifically we call it, uh, fault detection, obviously. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to, again, it could be it could be a large, capital goods provider. It could be a large electricity distributor. I can take an example of Power Grid Corporation. It's a public sector enterprise, in a huge public sector distributor that you have, and they've got a lot of capital expenditure across the country, big transformer machines, big distribution lines. In case you have ever been curious that which are the companies who are distributing power from the generators right to your homes, all these big electricity lines that you see, who are the companies doing it? And you can already imagine how useful and how beneficial machine learning can be for things like fault detection and stuff. So yes, definitely we are doing. There's a lot of applications of machine learning there, and cloud companies are already doing it in a huge way. Talk about Google Cloud, AWS, Azure. They have to do it. Like how do you predict server outage? All that stuff is yeah. So we use clustering algorithms and you know uh, uh, mostly things like anomaly detections and all that to detect something uncommon, things like that. Yes. Okay. Any other questions, friends?
San, we are done with the questions, I
Yeah.
guess. So,
Okay. Sure.
okay. Thank you for answering the questions. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. We shall be sending out the webinar recording to all you participants soon. I request you to kindly provide the feedback before signing off, which will help us improve the quality of our future events. Thanks again for joining us today. Signing off on behalf of Team Spring People. Hope to see you again for our next expert webinar. Bye-bye.